I would be willing to bet dollars to donuts that the vast majority of my audience has known someone or has been friends with someone that thinks more like a dog than they do a human. Dogs basically are stimulus response animals. If I do this thing, then this other thing will be the result. In this particular image, of course, I believe in the power of barking. I don't need a study to tell me that it works. The only reason I am alive today is because of barking. Every day, I bark my fool head off at the mailman every day he goes away, leaving my family unharmed. I have the power of barking to thank for that. Now, you could take the word barking and get rid of it, and you could replace it with virtually any other belief system or action, and the entire paragraph makes sense. But what's the problem? The dog automatically assumes that the mailman is coming there to harm his family, and that he's leaving because of the barking, when neither is true. The two instances have nothing to do with each other. Now, in today's video, we're going to try to elicit a response down in the comment section from two particular groups of people. Those who are always the downplayer of positives, and those who are negative filterers. We talked about this a little bit yesterday when we talked about Danny Donovan and cognitive biases that people have when they see information that doesn't agree with their worldview. See, just like the dog sees information. Here comes somebody toward my property, toward my area, and I perceive it as a threat, whether it is or not. And I'm going to take this action, and then if the desired result is achieved, then that action I'm going to then ascribe to the positive result. Now, what am I talking about? Archbishop of the military, Timothy Broglio, has now basically overruled the President of the United States and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Now, some might, recoil at that and say, wait a minute, how can that be? He's just a pastor. How can that be? Well, guess what? Army Times, Archbishop, Catholic troops can refuse COVID-19 vaccine, as really can Christians. Catholic troops should be allowed to refuse COVID-19 vaccines for conscientious reasons, the Archbishop for the Military Services USA wrote in a statement Tuesday. Quote, no one should be forced to receive a COVID-19 vaccine if it would violate the sanctity of his or her conscience, wrote Archbishop Timothy P. Broglio. In the statement, Broglio pointed to concerns surrounding the moral permissibility of the vaccine, citing abortion-related tissues used in development or testing. This is the second time Broglio released a statement providing moral guidance for vaccines. He wrote, being vaccinated is also an act of charity to our sisters and brothers. Now, he goes on to also say that those who choose to not be vaccinated should also choose to be tested and to wear masks and all this kind of stuff. But if this is the case, who's really in charge? Who's really in charge? Because one would think that the president, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, would have sat down with this particular individual and said, hey, how is this going to affect those who have a religious persuasion? And then they would have come to some type of an agreement, but they didn't do that, did they? You see, those in charge of the country now don't want to tell you this, but they're atheists. They absolutely believe that the Bible is a fairy tale and somewhat of a cult. That's the reality. And believe me, Those over in Rome know this. Now, this is going to cause a great deal of cognitive dissonance in my audience based on past comments. Because in my audience, I have a lot of anti-Semites. I have a lot of anti-Catholics. I have a lot of people who are also atheists who will try to find some negative way to talk about this. Some downplayer of positives. You see, we have the governor of Texas who has just signed an executive order stating that there can't be any vaccine mandates. And everybody's, oh, yay, wonderful, fantastic. You know, what say you, Florida? Texas is leading the way now. But they won't talk about this. They won't talk about this. I wonder how many soldiers are going to convert to Catholicism literally overnight. But then that would open up a whole nother host of issues, wouldn't it? Pay attention down in the comments. You're going to see a lot of talk about the Pope. A lot of talk about the Catholic religion. A lot about historically this and historically that. And what some cardinal did to someone somewhere some time ago in this other place. This is what they're going to do. Now, along that same line, Guard leaders, Army National Guard leaders, push back on some state missions, but will still do them. 12 October. Senior leaders from across the National Guard sounded off on the impact of continuing state missions during an October 12 panel at the Association of the U.S. Army Conference and a subsequent media roundtable. Major General Laura Yeager, who commands the California National Guard's 40th Infantry Division, even said her troops have been a victim of our own success. Now, this talks about how the federal government is reimbursing 100% of the cost of using the National Guard to fill in different places where there are labor shortages based on the vax mandate. The governor knows that when there's a problem he can't solve, he can come to the National Guard and we'll get it done. A very odd thing in California, a state that is run by people who have demonized the military for the last 40 years, hated the military, reviled the military. But boy, oh boy, when they sure need firefighting done or they need buses driven. The pandemic has also seen a key change for the governor's political calculus. The federal government is covering 100% of the costs associated with pandemic response, to include even missions addressing second-order effects of the disease, like food insecurity and a shortage of school bus drivers in some states. Over the last 18 months, the 100% reimbursement of our forces has actually disincentivized the state from ending the missions or releasing our forces. Now, this is a hard one to try to rectify in your mind. We want to say we're in support of the military. We want to, that's the good political position to take. But now they're on the 100% reimbursement dole from the feds to, in essence, subvert the political will of the American people. Because people are quitting jobs, taking the power of their money and their feet and saying, we're done. We're not going to do this. So then the federal government takes your tax dollars and then pays the National Guard to do the jobs that were vacated, which to me, honestly, is a violation of posse comitatus. But that's another argument for another day, probably. While many of these ongoing missions are primarily staffed with volunteers, as Major General Paul Rogers of the Michigan National Guard noted, Yeager said the state duty has had an impact on equipment readiness in some cases. meaning that they're deployed for so long they can't do maintenance. Based on politics. Now, as one last point, it's very popular right now and very chic to demonize the military, demonize the Catholic Church. But what happens when there's actually good news? Are we going to see from these people, their vomitous rage, the negative filters and the downplayers of positives? Are we going to hear from them? This Army program prevented a disease outbreak in a unit deploying to Afghanistan. Now, this is a very neat thing. I wish they would have had it when I was in. A set of human performance tools underdeveloped by the Army likely prevented a disease outbreak pre-deployment for one battalion and possibly saved the life of a soldier who was having suicidal thoughts. It's called Master E, measuring and advancing soldier tactical readiness and effectiveness. It's basically an Oura ring to monitor sleep, a Ready Band to monitor recovery, and a Polar Grit X smartwatch to monitor exertion. And basically what in this case it did is the data said, wait a minute, these guys are not getting enough sleep. These guys are way overexerting, and it's causing all sorts of medical problems, and they need to step down for a minute. They need to relax. Because they watched heart rates, they watched sleep patterns, they saw all sorts of different things based on performance, and they saw how performance dropped when there was a lack of sleep. Later, while completing a final 2-week field training event before deploying to Afghanistan, the commander himself got some human performance news. Rowe was told by Joseph Patterson, the soldier performance strategist for CCDC, that his sleep deprivation levels were so high that he was basically drunk while on the later stages of the field training. Hearing that helped the commander take notice of his sleep patterns, and he adjusted. Oh, if they would have had this when I was in the military. And I know a lot of you military guys out there know what I'm talking about. Even simple actions, avoiding food right before sleeping, helped him feel more rested and refreshed when he needed it the most. Now, why was he probably eating right before sleeping? Because he was on duty all day. He was on duty all damn day. And, got home and grabbed something to eat, shoved a bunch of crap in his face because he hadn't eaten all day, took a shower, and just crashed like most guys do. Down the road, while in Afghanistan, a soldier's sleep was consistently interrupted. Unit leaders checked in with a soldier who later said on a mental health evaluation that they weren't doing well. And then also revealed later on that because of this issue of lack of sleep, they were having suicidal thoughts. So this is technology doing a great job, doing what it's supposed to do. And I keep going back to this because I guarantee somebody's going to try to find a way to downplay the positive aspect of the Archbishop of the military giving soldiers options on the vaccine and also technology employed. Guarantee it. Mark my words. Go down to the comments. Take a look. It'll be there. You'll see the this is good and this is good, however types. This, and this, negative. Trying to almost do what they call a compliment sandwich, where you have a tiny little bun of a compliment at the top, and then you have a giant meat sandwich of criticism, and then a tiny little bun at the bottom of, but, I also kind of, think your channel's kind of good. Compliment sandwich. So, I will leave it there. But everyone knows this guy or girl. They do something, they think it makes a difference based on a bunch of false assumptions, and they continue to get reinforced based on the fact that they are just wildly not mentally capable of understanding everything that's going on. Not that dogs are bad. They're just simple. I'll leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you guys later.